I still remember the way the gravy bowl shook when my father slammed his fist on the Thanksgiving table. My startup had just collapsed, and I was back in Idaho after 3 years in San Francisco. The silence that followed felt like ice spreading through my chest. "I raised a pathetic loser," he spat, his face red with anger. The words hit harder than any punch. Mom stared at her plate, not defending me. My brother Alex smirked from across the table, already a big shot at some fancy tech company. His expression said it all. "I told you so." "All that money," Mom finally whispered. "Your college fund. Your savings. Gone for what, Chloe? A stupid dream?" I opened my mouth to explain again how my health tech startup had been so close, how PulseLight's AI could have changed rural healthcare forever. But nobody wanted to hear it. Not anymore. Even Jake, my fiancé, shifted uncomfortably beside me. His hand had slipped from mine when Dad started yelling. Now he was texting someone under the table, probably embarrassed to be sitting next to Silicon Valley's newest failure. "Well," Mom said, passing the mashed potatoes with a tight smile, "my friend's daughter manages the grocery store. I'm sure she could use holiday help." That's when I knew how far I'd fallen in their eyes. "You want to see why your precious startup failed?" Alex's voice sliced through the awkward silence of dessert. He pulled out his phone, holding it up like evidence in a murder trial. "Look at what your investors were saying." He passed his phone around. Screenshots of emails from my investors calling me naive, inexperienced, and in over her head. My face burned as Mom and Dad leaned in to read, their expressions moving from shock to disappointment. "This is just sad," Dad muttered, shaking his head. "And here's my favorite." Alex continued, swiping to another message. "The one where your lead investor says they dodged a bullet when your prototype failed." I reached for the phone, but he pulled it back, grinning. "Wait, there's more." That's when I saw it, a group text with my family members. And Jake. They'd been talking about me for weeks, sharing articles about my failure, making jokes. "Is this entertaining for you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Oh, come on," Alex laughed. "If you can't laugh at yourself." I glanced at Jake, expecting support. Instead, I saw him hiding a smile, his eyes fixed on his plate. In the chat, he'd sent a laughing emoji at a particularly cruel joke about me. My stomach twisted into knots. These weren't just strangers tearing me apart. This was my family, my fiancé, the people who were supposed to catch me when I fell. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Jake stood in the doorway of our apartment, suitcase in hand. I'd been sleeping on the couch since the dinner, too hurt to share our bed. "I can't do this anymore, Chloe," he said flatly. "I didn't sign up for a broke girlfriend." I stared at him, this man who'd promised to love me through better or worse just 8 months earlier when he'd proposed. 3 years together, and that's it? "You're bailing the second things get tough?" He had the nerve to look annoyed. "Things have been tough for months. Your startup was drowning, and you kept throwing good money after bad." "That was our decision," I reminded him. "You said you believed in PulseLight." "I believed in the Chloe who made 6 figures at Telmax," he shot back. "Not this, whatever you are now." As he turned to leave, his phone lit up with a text. The name flashed just long enough for me to see. Marissa, my former co-founder, the one I'd fired for cutting corners on patient safety protocols. "Are you serious?" My voice was barely a whisper. He didn't even look guilty, just shrugged and said, "Life moves on, Chloe. Maybe you should too." The door closed behind him. 2 weeks later, the eviction notice came. I couldn't make rent without his income. I had nowhere to go except back home to Idaho. I was broke, heartbroken, and utterly alone, just until you stop embarrassing us. That's what Mom said as she showed me to my childhood bedroom, now converted into a crafting space. A narrow twin bed had been squeezed between boxes of fabric and old scrapbooks. At 30, I was sleeping under posters of boy bands I'd liked at 15. Each morning, Dad made a point of rustling his newspaper loudly when I came downstairs. "Job hunting today?" he'd ask without looking up. "Yes," I'd answer, though nobody was hiring for tech positions in our small town. After a week of silent meals and sidelong glances, I escaped to the attic. Among dusty Christmas decorations and forgotten toys, I found a box labeled Chloe's College Stuff. Inside was my old laptop, the one I'd used to code the first version of PulseLight. I brushed off the dust and powered it up, surprised when it still worked. And there it was, My original prototype. The code that had once felt like magic. The program that had convinced investors to give me millions. Now it looked broken and incomplete, riddled with vulnerabilities I hadn't seen before. I traced my fingers over the keyboard, remembering the nights I'd stayed up coding, convinced I was building something that would change lives. How naive I'd been. But something stirred in me as I scrolled through the code, a tiny spark that hadn't quite died. Maybe I could fix this. Maybe I could make it work. She's got a degree from Stanford, and now she's stocking shelves, my father said loudly to our neighbor, Mr. Peterson. They stood near the hammers at Wilson's Hardware, where I'd been working for 3 weeks. I pretended not to hear as I arranged the display of power tools. The red vest they made me wear had Chloe Associates stitched on it, a daily reminder of how far I'd fallen. The job paid minimum wage, but it kept me busy during the day. At night, I worked on my code. Hour after hour in the garage, wrapped in blankets against the Idaho winter, I rebuilt PulseLight from scratch. No investors, no pressure. Just me and the problem I'd always wanted to solve. One Tuesday afternoon, a customer approached me in the garden section. "My kid's got these weird spots and a fever," he said, showing me a picture on his phone. "You know anything about plants that might cause a rash?" I glanced at the photo and froze. The pattern was distinctive, not a plant rash at all. "Sir, has your daughter been tired lately? Complaining about joint pain?" He looked startled. "Yeah, how'd you know?" I pulled out my phone, opened the rebuilt PulseLight diagnostic tool, and input the symptoms. The algorithm ran instantly. 89% probability of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. "You need to take her to a doctor," I said urgently. "Today." "Who exactly are you to diagnose my daughter?" The man stood in aisle 3, arms crossed, eyeing me with suspicion. His name was David Reynolds, I'd learned, and he wasn't happy that the hardware girl was giving medical advice. "I'm not diagnosing her," I explained carefully. "But these symptoms together, they need medical attention, soon." "Well, thanks, but we've already seen a doctor. They said it's just a virus." I bit my lip, not wanting to overstep, but feeling sure the algorithm was right. "If she gets worse, please get a second opinion." 3 days later, David Reynolds was back, his face pale with worry. "Her fever's up to 103. She can barely walk." My heart sank. "You need to take her to the hospital. Ask specifically about JRA." The next day, he didn't come to the store, or the next. I worried I'd overstepped, maybe even made things worse. Then a week later, a woman in a white coat appeared in front of my register. "I'm Dr. Ava Reynolds," she said. "You told my husband about our daughter Emma." I swallowed hard, preparing for her anger. Instead, she looked at me with intensity. "You were right. Juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. The hospital confirmed it yesterday. How did you know?" David appeared behind her. "She knew before the specialists did, Ava." Dr. Reynolds studied me. "You're not just a hardware store employee, are you?" Dr. Reynolds stood in my parents' garage, staring at the setup I'd cobbled together. An old laptop connected to 2 second-hand monitors, running the rebuilt PulseLight program. "You made this here?" she asked, gesturing at the space heater, folding table, and extension cords snaking across the concrete floor. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "It's not fancy, but it works. Usually." She circled the table, examining the code on the screen. "I run a rural health clinic 30 miles from here," she said slowly. "We serve 5 counties, and we're always short on specialists." My heart skipped. PulseLight was designed exactly for places like that. "So I've been reading." She pulled out a printed article about my failed startup. "What happened?" I gave her the short version. "Technical failures, regulatory roadblocks, investor panic. But you kept working on it," she observed. "Every night," I admitted. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "I want to test it. At my clinic." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Seriously?" "On one condition," she added. "It has to work on a real case. Tomorrow, I have a patient with unusual symptoms that we haven't been able to diagnose. Let's see what your program says." Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in months. "Deal." "No, no, no!" I slammed my palm against the side of the laptop as the screen froze, then went black. Dr. Reynolds and her nurse looked at each other nervously. We were 30 minutes into testing PulseLight on an actual patient, a 63-year-old woman with mysterious symptoms that had puzzled the rural clinic for weeks. The program had been analyzing blood work and symptom patterns when it crashed. I'm so sorry, I whispered, mortified. Here was my big chance, and the system was failing. Again, Dr. Reynolds touched my shoulder. Can you fix it? I don't understand what happened. It was working perfectly last night. I rebooted the laptop, but the program wouldn't load. Error messages filled the screen. The diagnostic algorithm, my life's work, was corrupted somehow. The patient sighed and gathered her purse. I should go. Wait, Dr. Reynolds said, then turned to me. How long would it take to rebuild? I did a quick mental calculation. 48 hours, maybe? But I'd need to figure out what caused the crash first. She studied me, then nodded. Do it, fix whatever went wrong, and come back Friday morning. I looked up, surprised. You're giving me another chance? I saw enough to be intrigued, she said. But next time, it needs to work. All the way through. I nodded, already mentally tracing the code path that had failed. I won't let you down. Error messages filled my screen as I dug through the corrupted code. After 20 straight hours, I found something strange, a backdoor protocol I hadn't written. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my program. But who would do that? And when? I traced the intrusion path, finding a signature in the code. Every programmer has quirks in how they write, personal stamps as unique as fingerprints. I recognized the style immediately. Alex. My brother had inserted malicious code that activated whenever the program reached the final diagnostic stage. It would corrupt the results, making PulseLight look unreliable. No wonder my demo for investors had failed so spectacularly. I checked the timestamp, 3 days before my big presentation in San Francisco, right when Alex had helped by backing up my files. My hands shook as I scrolled further, finding an email thread. Alex had sent the corrupted file to Jake before the launch. They'd both known the demo would crash. Why? I whispered to my empty garage. My own brother had deliberately tanked my company. My fiancé had let it happen. Was it jealousy? Revenge for not giving Alex a position? Or something worse? I deleted the malicious code, reworked the corrupted sections, and strengthened every security protocol. By dawn on Friday, I had a clean, working version of PulseLight. This time, no one would sabotage my second chance. Silence filled the exam room as PulseLight processed the last set of symptoms. The same patient from 2 days ago watched anxiously, along with Dr. Reynolds and 2 nurses. The screen flashed green, diagnostic complete. PulseLight had identified a rare autoimmune disorder, one that matched all her symptoms but was easily overlooked because of its similarity to more common conditions. That's... Dr. Reynolds stared at the screen. That actually makes perfect sense. She turned to the patient. We need to run one more blood test to confirm, but this could explain everything you've been experiencing. The woman's eyes filled with tears. After 3 years of being told it's all in my head? Dr. Reynolds squeezed her hand, then looked at me. This could change everything for us, Chloe. For rural healthcare everywhere. My heart soared. This was what I'd dreamed of when I'd first created PulseLight, helping people in underserved areas get answers. We should announce this, one of the nurses said excitedly. Get you back in the press. I shook my head firmly. No press, no announcements. Not yet. Dr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Why not? Last time I focused on hype instead of results, I explained. This time we collect data. We help real patients. We build proof that no one can argue with. She smiled slowly. I like how you think. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The real Chloe Maddox was back. The rejection letter arrived 6 weeks after I'd submitted my application to the Rural Health Innovation Grant. By then, PulseLight had successfully diagnosed 23 cases at Dr. Reynolds' clinic, including 3 that had previously stumped specialists. I tore open the envelope, confident that our data would speak for itself. Dear Miss Maddox, we regret to inform you that your application has not been selected for funding. No explanation. No feedback. Just rejection. Dr. Reynolds frowned when I showed her the letter. This doesn't make sense. Your results are extraordinary. That night, I received an anonymous email from someone on the grant committee. Check who's on the board. I searched the committee members online and froze when I saw the name. Uncle Rick. My father's brother, who'd always treated me with a kind of amused condescension. But that wasn't all. Further research revealed Uncle Rick had recently invested in Mediscan, a startup creating diagnostic AI suspiciously similar to PulseLight. I slumped back in my chair, the pieces falling into place. First Alex and Jake, now Uncle Rick. My own family was systematically working to ensure PulseLight failed. Why did they want me to fail so badly? I printed the grant committee list and Metascan's investor page, pinning them to my garage wall. If playing fair wouldn't work, I needed a new strategy. They thought I was just a pathetic loser who would give up. They were about to learn how wrong they were. You were sabotaged. I have proof. The voice on the phone belonged to Zach Torres, a junior staffer at the Rural Health Foundation. We'd met briefly when I'd submitted my grant application. Uncle Rick blocked your application, he continued. He never even let the committee review your data. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because what you're doing could help people like my mom, he said. She lives in a town with one doctor. She had to drive 4 hours to get properly diagnosed with lupus. I paced my garage, anger and determination building. So what now? There's a back door, Zach explained. The innovation board that funds rural clinic upgrades. They work directly with the clinics, bypassing the grant committee. And they talk to me? They'll talk to Dr. Reynolds, he clarified. She's respected. If she presents your data directly to them, I immediately called Ava. She listened, then said simply, I'll make the calls tonight. 2 days later, she texted me, meeting set with Innovation Board, bring everything we've got. Meanwhile, I discovered something disturbing. Metascan's prototype looked eerily like PulseLight's original design, down to the user interface. Someone had stolen my work. I added this to my growing wall of evidence. The picture was becoming clearer and uglier by the day. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they'd actively tried to destroy me. 12 clinics want to pilot PulseLight. Ava burst into the garage where I'd been coding for hours, her face flushed with excitement. The Innovation Board was blown away by our data. They're funding a limited rollout across the state. I stood up so fast I knocked over my chair. Are you serious? She handed me the approval letter. It's happening, Chloe. Over the next month, we installed PulseLight in 12 rural clinics across Idaho. Each installation took me days of work, customizing the system to fit their needs. The results came quickly. A 4-year-old boy with a rare blood disorder, diagnosed in minutes instead of months. An elderly farmer with an uncommon form of Parkinson's. A teenage girl whose mysterious symptoms turned out to be a treatable hormone imbalance. Email after email flooded in from grateful doctors. Patient waited 2 years for answers. PulseLight found it in 20 minutes. We've decreased referrals to specialists by 40%. Please don't stop what you're doing. Even when the initial funding ran low, the clinics scraped together resources to keep PulseLight running. They weren't just users, they were becoming believers. Then came the call that changed everything. Miss Maddox, this is Senator Wallace's office. She'd like to discuss your healthcare innovation. I nearly dropped my phone. A state senator wanted to talk about PulseLight? My quiet rise wasn't so quiet anymore. The Idaho Health Policy Summit invitation arrived via email. Not addressed to me, but forwarded by Dr. Reynolds with a note. They want me to present innovative rural healthcare solutions. I said I'd only do it if you could come. I scanned the agenda. No mention of PulseLight or my name. Just a vague panel on technology in rural medicine where Ava would speak. Then I saw it. A keynote address by Jake Mitchell, CTO of Metascan, the future of AI diagnostics. My ex-fiancé was presenting a knockoff of my technology as his own innovation. He's using my work, I told Ava over coffee. Metascan is just a clone of PulseLight's early design. She studied me. Then come to the summit and show them the real thing. My name's not even on the program. I get 15 minutes on that panel, she said firmly, and I'm giving 10 of them to you. The summit was in 2 weeks. If I went, I'd be directly challenging Jake and, by extension, the investors who'd backed him, including my uncle. If I stayed away, I'd be letting them win. Again, I thought about my father calling me a pathetic loser, about Alex sabotaging my code, about all the nights I'd spent rebuilding what they'd tried to destroy. I'll be there, I said finally. But I'm going to need a volunteer from the audience. The conference room was packed when Dr. Reynolds took the podium. Doctors, hospital administrators, and health policymakers filled every seat. In the front row, Jake sat with Uncle Rick, both looking bored. Before I discuss rural telemedicine, Ava said. "I'd like to introduce you to Chloe Maddox, who's developed something extraordinary." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Jake's head snap up, his face paling. I walked onto the stage, my heart pounding. "I need a volunteer with an undiagnosed medical condition." The room went quiet. Then a woman in a crimson blazer stood up. "I've had unexplained symptoms for months. 3 specialists, no answers. I hadn't planned this. May I ask who you are?" "Catherine Wallace, state senator." The audience gasped. Senator Wallace, the most powerful health policy advocate in the state, was volunteering. I set up my laptop and connected it to the presentation screen. "Senator, could you please list your symptoms?" She described fatigue, joint pain, and recurring rashes. As she spoke, I entered the data into PulseLight. The system worked flawlessly, analyzing the symptoms against thousands of conditions. In seconds, it produced 3 likely diagnoses, with 1 clear leader: mixed connective tissue disease. The senator stared at the screen. "My God, my mother had this. No one ever thought to test me." The room erupted in a standing ovation. At the back, I saw Jake slipping out the door. But it didn't matter anymore. PulseLight had just announced itself to the world. "The World Health Organization is on line 1 for you, Miss Maddox." I nearly choked on my coffee. 3 months after the Health Policy Summit, PulseLight had expanded to 43 clinics across 3 states. But WHO, that was unexpected. "Miss Maddox," said the crisp voice on the phone, "I'm Dr. Amara Okafor, director of the WHO's Rural Health Initiative. We've been watching your work with great interest." My hands trembled as I gripped the phone. "You have?" "Indeed. We would like to discuss implementing PulseLight in developing regions. Could you come to Geneva next month?" I sat down hard in my chair. "Of course." After we hung up, another call came through, this time from Dr. Okafor's assistant. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. "We've already tested PulseLight." "You've what?" "Someone leaked an early version to us 6 months ago. We've been running trials in Tanzania. The results are remarkable." My mind raced. Who had access to leak my software? Then I remembered. The Rural Health Innovation Board had requested a copy of the code. Someone there must have sent it to WHO. "Is that a problem?" she asked, misreading my silence. "No," I said, realizing this leak had worked in my favor. "Actually, it's perfect." The next day, I received an official letter from WHO requesting partnership talks. I pinned it to my garage wall, next to the rejection letter from Uncle Rick's committee. PulseLight was going global. $500 million. The government health official repeated the number, sliding the contract across the table. 1 year after the WHO partnership, PulseLight had proven itself across 4 continents. Now the U.S. Department of Health wanted to implement it in every federally funded clinic in America. "This would be the largest AI diagnostic rollout in history," he added. I stared at the paper, unable to process the number. From my parents' garage to a $500 million contract. "Before we proceed," another official said, "we'll need a standard background check. Family references, previous employers." My stomach tightened. Of course. That evening, my phone rang with an unrecognized number. "Chloe, it's Alex, my brother." After nearly 2 years of silence. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "I heard about the government contract," he said. "Congratulations." I said nothing. "Listen." His voice hardened. "I'm worried about what you might say during your background check." "Why would you be worried, Alex?" "Because they might ask about your mental health," he said. "And I have records from when you were unstable, after PulseLight crashed." The threat was clear. Sabotage me again, or he'd paint me as mentally unfit. "Is blackmail a family tradition?" I asked. "Just looking out for both of us," he replied smoothly. "Your success reflects on the family name." After he hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, shaking with rage. They still thought they could control me. They had no idea what I'd become. If they want to break me again, let them try. I wrote these words in a letter to my lawyer, authorizing her to prepare for potential legal battles with my family. After Alex's threat, I knew they might try anything to claim a piece of my success or destroy it if they couldn't. But I had evidence now. Screenshots of Alex's code sabotage, records of Jake's betrayal, documentation of Uncle Rick's conflict of interest. My lawyer called it bulletproof protection. The next week, I received an unexpected invitation to give a TEDx talk. The theme? Rising from failure. On stage, under bright lights, I told my entire story. the startup crash, my family calling me a pathetic loser, working from a garage while they mocked me, finding evidence of sabotage, building Pulselight anyway. Failure isn't what destroys us, I concluded. It's believing what others say about our failure that does the real damage. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Backstage, my phone buzzed with notifications as the video went viral in real time. Comments flooded in. This brought me to tears. I needed to hear this today. Chloe Maddox is my new hero. That night, Forbes requested an interview, then Business Insider, then the Wall Street Journal. Pulselight wasn't just a success story anymore. It was becoming a movement, and I was its unexpected face. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. After the TEDx talk went viral and the government contract was announced, everyone wanted a piece of Chloe Maddox, the woman who revolutionized rural healthcare from her parents' garage. Venture capitalists who'd rejected me now wanted meetings. Former employees who'd jumped ship begged to return. Investors who'd pulled out claimed they'd always believed in the vision. Then the calls from family started coming. First, Mom, honey, we're so proud of you. We always knew you could do it. Next, Dad, that's my girl making headlines. I was tough on you because I knew you had it in you. Let's discuss how I can help Pulselight reach its full potential. And finally, Alex, sis, remember all our great talks about tech? I'd love to grab coffee. I let every call go to voicemail. Every message received the same response, silence. Not because I was angry, though part of me still was, but because their validation no longer mattered. I didn't need them to believe in me anymore. The world did. Dr. Reynolds stopped by my new office, grinning at the stack of business cards and letters piled on my desk. Going to call any of them back? I shook my head. I'm too busy building something that matters. She laughed. That's the Chloe I know. In the corner, my phone lit up again. Jake's name flashed on the screen. I pressed decline without a second thought. The Maddox property is officially on the market. Ava sent me the listing with a question mark. My childhood home, where my parents still lived, was for sale at a surprisingly low price. I made some calls and discovered the truth. Alex was in legal trouble. A sexual harassment lawsuit from his former assistant, plus gambling debts. My parents were selling their home to bail him out. The irony wasn't lost on me. The son they'd championed as the success story needed rescuing, while the daughter they'd dismissed as a loser was now worth millions. Are you going to help them? Ava asked over lunch. I considered it. Despite everything, they were still my family. Then I remembered Thanksgiving dinner. My father's fist on the table. I raised a pathetic loser. The group chat mocking my failure. No, I said finally, but I do have another idea. I contacted a real estate attorney and created an anonymous LLC. Through this shell company, I made a cash offer for the house, 20% above asking price, no inspection required. My parents accepted immediately, not knowing their pathetic loser daughter was the buyer. The paperwork went through quickly. My parents would have 30 days to vacate after closing, which would happen on December 24th. Yes, I deliberately chose Christmas Eve. Some wounds run too deep for complete forgiveness. Sometimes, justice needs to be served cold. On Christmas morning, my parents opened a special delivery package. Inside was a legal eviction notice, giving them 30 days to vacate the property I now owned. Paperclipped to it was a cashier's check for $500,000, more than enough to buy a new home and settle Alex's debts. And a note that read simply, "From your pathetic loser. Merry Christmas." I wasn't there to see their reactions, but Ava's cousin lived next door and reported that my mother fainted. My father sat on the porch steps for hours, staring into space, the check clutched in his hand. Alex called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Mom sent a text, "We were wrong, so terribly wrong. Please forgive us." Dad emailed, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm prouder of you than words can say." I read each message without responding. The truth was, I didn't hate them anymore. I just didn't need them. On New Year's Eve, I received an official letter from my father. Inside was the deed to my first computer, the one he'd bought me when I was 12. "You always knew where you were going," he'd written. I was too blind to see it. I put the letter in a box with all the others. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond. But not yet. For now, I had a company to build and lives to change. The personal reconciliation could wait. The opening bell at NASDAQ rang loud and clear as I pressed the button, officially taking Pulselight public. Our IPO valued the company at $4.2 billion, making it the most successful health tech offering of the year. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, the stock ticker scrolled our symbol across the gigantic screen in Times Square. 3 days later, I sat across from Oprah Winfrey, discussing Pulselight's journey for her podcast. When everyone said it couldn't be done, she said, leaning forward, "What kept you going?" I thought about the real answer: spite, determination, and the burning need to prove my family wrong. But that wasn't the whole truth anymore. I believed in the problem more than I believed in the obstacles, I replied. Rural healthcare needs solutions. That truth was bigger than my failure. The next week, Forbes put me on their cover. The Comeback Queen: How Chloe Maddox Built a Billion-Dollar Company from a Garage. The article mentioned my family only briefly, noting that personal challenges had forced Maddox to rebuild from scratch. I'd requested they minimize that part of the story. This wasn't about family drama anymore. When the board offered me the chairperson position, I accepted on one condition: that Pulselight would always prioritize impact over profit. They agreed unanimously. My parents sent flowers to the office. I had my assistant donate them to a nearby hospital. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others. I didn't look back. I built forward. The Time journalist nodded, scribbling notes as we sat in Pulselight's headquarters amid awards celebrating our healthcare impact. What's next for Chloe Maddox? I'm launching the Rural Innovation Fund. $100 million for women entrepreneurs from underserved communities who've been dismissed or underestimated. Thousands applied after the article ran. I read every application, remembering how rejection felt. When we announced our first investments, Mom sent a card with a faded photo of 12-year-old me holding my science fair trophy. "You were never a loser," she'd written. I was just too scared to understand what winning really looked like. I placed it on my desk. Not for her. For me. A line wrapped around my old high school gym for Pulselight's first rural innovation workshop. Hundreds waited to join our program teaching AI and healthcare technology to young people. Backstage, I peeked at the crowd of bright-eyed dreamers. Then I froze. My father stood in the back row, hair grayer than I remembered. He caught my eye and gave an uncertain nod. I looked away. We hadn't spoken since the Christmas check. On stage, I spoke about resilience and believing in your vision when others can't. Kids lined up for hours with questions. As the gym emptied, I noticed my father had slipped away without approaching. Part of me was relieved. Another part wondered if some bridges stay broken too long. I stood in my parents' old garage, my garage now, running my fingers along the folding table where Pulselight was reborn. "Right here is where they said I died," I whispered, smiling. I'd preserved this space exactly as it was during those rebuilding months. Tomorrow, 20 teenage girls would start the Pulselight Young Innovators program here. Mom's letter arrived last week. They'd bought a small house nearby. Alex moved to Chicago. Jake's company folded. She asked, "Can we ever be a family again?" I still had no answer. Some wounds heal, others just stop bleeding. My success wasn't about proving them wrong, but proving myself right. That's the thing about losers. We build in silence, then we roar.